Today is cable management day. Ron told me that it would be nice to have one of my printers that I build look like I didn't build it. I can't argue with him. I'm not great at cable management, but I'm going to try. So the first thing that I've done is put this sheathing around a lot of the wires. I like this stuff. This is the spiral wrap stuff. I'm not sure what this is made of. It's a soft plastic. It's easy to put on. It's easy to take off if you need to. And it's easy to join a couple pieces together. I've got lots of scraps of it and I like to use it. So I've put that on a lot of this and run some of the wires, other wires through the channels with these channel covers on it so they all come out in one place. What I'm going to do is I toyed with where exactly I wanted to mount the control rather than leaving it separate. I'm going to mount it back here on the back here, facing this way. I've got a bracket that is printing right now for that, so I will wait for that to print. And what else was I doing? Oh yeah, I did get my uprights aligned because those were not lined up correctly. I never did tighten them down, so I got all that lined up. Everything's good. I haven't printed anything yet, but everything should be good to go on that. Since the goal of this project was to take the old Q3D printer and make it into a new printer and reuse as many parts as I could, I was keeping track of what I do have left over that I didn't actually use in this project. So I've got all of the original cut wood frame that this came with, and I'll give them credit, as far as a design project, to be able to take this MDF and put it together in such a way that you could fit together, slot together, I guess these pieces don't go together, but slot together these wood pieces into a frame. There was a lot of design work involved to make that happen, and they did do a good job with the design, even if the materials and the construction didn't pan out to be a solid printer. So all those pieces, I don't have any use for them, really. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I should throw it away because it's just garbage now. And the other thing I didn't use were the original belts. These are not GT2 belts. They are thicker, a little bit heftier. They're not the same pitch. I couldn't use them. So because I couldn't use those belts, I also could not use the original pulleys. So maybe if I wanted to, I could use these pulleys on something else, these belts. I don't know what it would be. And then I had a couple of spacers for the bearings that I didn't use, and a handful of metric screws and standard screws, because why not? Let's combine those two. So that's really all I had left over of this whole project. I used all the motors, a lot of the hardware, the wiring, the controller, reused the bed mount in the bed. That was really, I used the wood from that, and I used the wood from the extruder to keep the extruder. I'll reuse these screws. I've got a big bin of screws that I'll dump it into. But overall, I think I did fairly well with reusing and upcycling this printer into a completely new printer and not wasting much of it. So that was pretty good to see. It was certainly my desire to use as many of the original parts in this printer, but I'm seeing that one of the weak links of this whole original build is the extruder. It is just absolutely horrible. Even though I've got my hot end tightened down better than I did before, if it isn't strong enough, it's got this little tiny gear and it doesn't really have good teeth on it. It's just horrible. So I'm constantly fighting over extrusion, under extrusion. It'll jam. This is jammed 3 times. I finally just gave up, where it just won't move filament through anymore. And I'll have to pull it through, cut the end off, and restart it. And then it prints fine for a while, but you can see I've tried multiple times here, and I can't even get through a single benchy because my filament keeps jamming. And I've messed with my slicer settings. I did find a problem with that, and so I started from scratch, milled a whole new profile. That seemed to help, but it's really not. So I've got a couple things I'm going to try. I'm going to try to just replace that gear and see if I can get something that'll bite into the filament better. And if I can't do that, I've got an old Mark 10 extruder assembly that I can see if I can mount onto this, and maybe that'll help. So we'll see what happens. Oh, you may have noticed that it's now sitting on a towel instead of on the table. It turns out my table is this plastic, you probably can't hear that, it's just a hollow plastic table, and every noise that the printer makes is amplified by this table. So here's a little video. I don't know if you can catch this or not. I'm not using my my other mic. I'm just using the phone, where it's sitting on the table and the kind of noise it makes, and then it's sitting on a towel and the kind of noise it makes. And hopefully you can hear the difference between the two. So right there you can see maybe that the red filament is tracking farther away from you. It's on the far edge of the bearing. And what it needs to look like, I can do this with one hand. I can't. But if I set the phone down really quickly, come back to it, now you can see that that filament is on the silver part of the bearing. So that's the problem, is my filament is tracking off to the side and getting pinched in that idler bearing, so that it's too much resistance for the drive gear to drive it. And you can see it's starting to track off to the side again. The faster I go, the worse this gets. If I slow the print speed down, it seems like it doesn't do that for some reason. You can see in the hole in the top of this tensioner how much room there is to feed this through here. So there's all kinds of room for it to move back and forth and track itself differently. So I need to come up with some way to keep it pushed this direction so that it tracks straight on that bearing. If you're old enough, you can remember those old vibrating table football games that they used to make. I think I'm going to make a new sport out of this, the dueling benchies. So just put them on the table and let them duke it out. All right, so a lot has been happening here, and I haven't documented a lot of it. Fighting my extruder badly, and these are some of the examples of it, that I'm just having a lot of filament problems. So what I ended up doing, yeah, you can see how badly that's tracking. I tried to put my Mark 10 extruder on here, and it wouldn't fit right because it's just wouldn't fit right. So I ended up replacing the hot end. I had a spare hot end from something else, and I installed that one. Made a world of difference. This is my Benchy now with the better hot end, and it's still not great because of the cooling. I didn't have a good cooling fan on it, but it's way, way better. I know what happened here. My filament spool got bound up. So I just fixed that and let it finish to see what it would do. And everything looks better. The smokestack looks better. My overhangs look really good. Come on, camera. There we go. So I don't know why it's not doing this. Oh, it's because that's moving. There we go. Maybe? I don't know. That's late. But my overhangs with no cooling are pretty good. My portholes are pretty good. I was overall very impressed. So I went ahead and designed a cooling fan duct for this. So I added another piece. It's kind of hard to see in the dark, but added this piece to the extruder, and that goes over to mount to a fan. And then I designed this duct to come down here, and this is my first actual parts cooling duct I've designed, so it's a little wonky, but getting the job done. So I am now seeing how this will print with the cooling fan on it, and it seems like I've got a lot of the extruder issues worked out. I did make a little piece here that just fits down into the slot. You can just pull that out, maybe. So that is just a little piece I designed. It's got a notch in it, and it fits down into that slot there. So that forces the filament to drop the piece on the floor. Oh, there it is. So anyway, keeps it tracking to one side of the bearing there, which is what I wanted. But having said that, this extruder is so weak. It's really horrible. So at some point I'm going to replace it. I'd like this to be an actual real printer, even though I did all the work of trying to reuse all the pieces. But I did get my mount made for, let's try it this way, for my ramps board. If you can see the whole mount better from over here. There we go. So that's got my electronics all mounted to that. I've got a 12-volt brick running this, and I'm going to put a jack on it so I can unplug it. Right now it's just wired directly into the ramps. But got a lot of stuff resolved. Didn't spend as much time on this as I wanted to, but Ron's busy with his Prusa videos, so it's not like anybody's going to watch mine right now anyway. So we'll see how this turns out, and then we're going to call it a day. It finished. Mostly. Kind of. It actually did the entire thing, and then at the smokestack, it crapped out for some reason. I don't know why. It did everything else. Well, not great, but I know what's happening now. Now, I can at least see what's going on. It's super obvious. I've got some Z-banding there. You can see that along here. I measured it. It's the exact same pitch as my lead screw. So, obviously, my lead screw, as previously mentioned, was worn out and torn up. So, I'm going to have to replace that if I want this to ever go away. Another thing I realized is this looks really tall for a benchy. And so I measured my Z calibration. I just used my calipers and measured that. And somehow, and I didn't change this from when it was the original setting. So I never changed it, but somehow it's not right. It's actually moving farther on the Z-axis than you command it. When you move 10 millimeters, it's more like 10.5 millimeters or something like that. So that would explain why, and I don't know, you won't be able to see it with the camera, but there's these little gaps between layers sometimes where it physically looks like the filament just wasn't close enough to the next layer, the previous layer, to connect to it. And now I know why, because it's moving, each layer is farther away from the previous layer than it's supposed to be. So I can see that now. So I can calibrate that and hopefully fix that. So for all the effort I put into this for trying to keep all the original parts, a lot of them are junk. My lead screw and my lead screw nut are junk. My extruder's junk. My stepper motors are good. My linear bearings are good. I do have a few good parts here, but some of the most critical things to having a good print are garbage. So, anyway, I'm going to keep working on it because I do want to have an actual functional printer when I'm done here.